Hello and welcome to another episode of Coffee Break Blogging. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about social media, specifically some of the tools that you can use to make it a more convenient thing to do. Here's the thing, social media, as some of you may know, can actually be a pretty time-consuming thing. It's one of those things that if you do it as a lot of the gurus say you should do it, then you can sink so much time into social media that you will not have time to grow your business. And that makes no sense. If you've got no time to grow your business, and I'm a big believer in creating the business assets as you go so that you actually have some hope of growing and having a revenue stream at some point, then you're just not going to have time to do that if you're so busy making content, tweeting it, making content, tweeting it, etc., etc. And so we need to use some tools so that we can do it and make it a more convenient thing to do, because social media makes a lot of sense. It's smart to be out there. When they tell you to go out and engage on social media, that's not bad advice. The thing is, we've got to make it convenient and not make it take up a majority of our time. So let's go over a few tools that I have used. Many of these you probably will have heard about. I'm going to mention 4 specifically. Now, the first one, and it's actually really popular, and that is HootSuite. Okay, now HootSuite, I use it to interface with Twitter, Facebook. It doesn't work with Google Plus. I think it can work with the Google Plus pages, but not your Google Plus personal profile, because that's just a limitation of Google Plus. But anyway, the whole idea with HootSuite is that it's a little bit of a one-stop shop. Now, the other thing that I like about HootSuite is that you can create columns based on things like a search criteria or a Twitter list or these types of things. So when it comes to Twitter specifically, if you're going to engage on Twitter, you want to engage with the right people. So if somebody replies to you, you're probably going to want to acknowledge them. So you can set up a column for your at replies. But you probably also want to have a few different lists of people who are influencers in your space. And that's for 2 different reasons. One is so that you can interact with them and build that relationship with them. But the other thing that you could do is monitor what they're doing. You can actually create a column based on many of the other players in your particular niche, just so you can see what their latest blog posts are and what they're doing in general. And you can do all that with a nice tool like HootSuite. Now, there are a lot of other Twitter tools out there. HootSuite just happens to be the one that I use, and it makes Twitter a lot more convenient. I mean, you can also go to twitter.com and do it right there on their site. I just don't find it to be as convenient as using HootSuite. Okay. Now, the next tool that I want to mention, again, another one that many people know about, is called Buffer. And you can find that over at bufferapp.com. Now, Buffer, if you just look at that word buffer, and it might tell you exactly what it does. You've actually got a little buffer or a queue sitting there that you can throw updates into. And so these updates could be stuff that you manually type in and add to your buffer. It could be stuff that you have a button installed on your browser and you see some other person's blog post that you want to throw in there. You can just add it to your buffer real quick. And the whole idea is that on a schedule that you predetermine, the updates in your buffer will simply be released. So basically what this is a way for you to have a fairly consistent stream of shares on your Twitter account, also Facebook and LinkedIn and some other networks. But you can sit down and do all that work at once, or when you're in that mode. I mean, if you're in the mode of where you're reading other blogs, that's a great opportunity to add a few things to your buffer. Okay. Now, then when you do that work, you're set for a little while. Okay. As long as your buffer doesn't run out of stuff to send out on your channels, you're good for a little while. So it's another approach to making things convenient. Now, that actually reminds me, one quick thing I want to mention about HootSuite before was that you can actually schedule updates over there as well. So you can actually, like we talked in a prior episode here about how when it comes to networks like Twitter, you've got to share your blog post multiple times because of the noise factor over there. Well, using something like HootSuite allows you to do that. You can sit down and spend 5 or 10 minutes after you publish a blog post to schedule out some reshares of that same post over the course of the next week or so after you've published that blog post. And you could do that with Hootsuite. You just simply schedule a tweet, and you can actually give yourself a little column inside of Hootsuite to show your scheduled tweets. So in one site, with your eyes, you can actually be like, oh, okay, I see what's coming up here over the next week, and done deal, right? Now, that same idea can work inside a Buffer as well, because that's the entire idea of Buffer. Let's move on to the third one here. Now, this one is not quite as popular, mainly because it's not a very old tool. It's actually a fairly recent tool. It's called Edgar. Now, the domain is called meetedgar.com. It's actually put out by Laura Roeder's team, and she's kind of gotten into the software business now. But meetedgar.com it's a cool tool. Now, I was using it for a few months, and full disclosure, I am no longer using it, and I will tell you why, but it's not a fault of the tool. The tool is actually very nicely done. Here's what it does. If you take the idea of Buffer and you've got these different, you've got that queue set up where you can add things to it. Well, with Meet Edgar, you take that same concept, but you can break it up into categories, okay? So you got different buffers based on different types of updates. It could be a buffer for other people's blog posts. It could be a buffer for your own blog post. It could be a buffer purely for promotional updates, things that are for sale or squeeze page links and stuff like that to get people to opt into your list. And you can set up these things as categories. So basically, you're setting up a library of potential updates based on categories on the things you want to do. So you can, I had one set up on different tips. So I would put out, quotes and tips and stuff like that on Twitter. I would also take some of my best blog posts and add those to a category in my library. The good thing about this is that what Meet Edgar does that Buffer doesn't is that it will repeat it. It will randomly draw on a schedule that you specify. It will randomly draw from your library and send it out. So you actually take the time to say, at this time slot on a Monday, I want to send this type of tweet. And it'll see that and it will go, okay, I'm going to go to that category, pull a tweet from that library and send it out at that time. And so I'm hoping if you understood that idea here in the audio format, you could really automate a lot of stuff using a tool like Meet Edgar. Okay. You can send out a lot of great updates. And I've noticed some of the people that I know out there, including me, I was using it for several months, have automated stuff with Meet Edgar. For example, if you have a Facebook group, you can actually have different themed days where every day you send out a different type of update to the Facebook group. And you can do that with Meet Edgar. Now, you might ask, why did I turn it off? If it's such a great tool, why did I turn it off? Well, here's the thing. It is true that in order to get the most bang for your buck, so to speak, with social media, you've got to be engaged. Now, with Meet Edgar, and the other tools are like this as well, it's really easy to become reliant on the automaticity of the way that it works. So what was happening was my Twitter account was sending updates and they were coming from the library, and it was getting to the point where I was even starting to see repeats of the same things and stuff like that. Now, I could spend a few hours and make the library bigger. I could do that. But the other problem here is that when a new blog post came out, which I tend to post one every week, or a new podcast episode, we'd have to go into Meet Edgar and add it to a specific category and the whole thing. And it just got to the point where if I have to manage it to that degree, maybe I don't need it. Okay. So it really came down to, what do I really want my social media profiles to look like? And it just came to the point where Meet Edgar wasn't really the right tool for me anymore. I didn't want to automate it to that degree. Now, with you, it might be a tool you want to check out, but you want to keep in mind with Meet Edgar that it is not an engagement platform, okay? It's a way to start conversations. You can use Meet Edgar to, on a schedule, send out stuff, but it is a one-way flow. It's essentially using your social media channels like a megaphone. So you still need to use a tool like HootSuite or something like that to see what people are saying back to you and actually engage and have that two-way dialogue on social media, okay? So you got to look at what Meet Edgar is. It's good at what it does, but you have to look at what it does and determine whether you really need it, okay? The fourth and last tool that I'm going to mention here, and I've mentioned this before on a prior episode, and that was CoSchedule. Now, CoSchedule is a social media updating tool that works in conjunction with WordPress. So it's a service. I think I pay like $9 a month or something like that for it. And it integrates into WordPress via a plugin. Now, what it does is it allows me to, whenever I publish a new piece of content, I can set up a social media schedule for that particular blog post in advance so that when I hit the publish button, not only does that post go live, but the social media schedule that I've created for it begins. And so being that I wanted my social accounts to concentrate on my most recent stuff with periodically some updates of past stuff, CoSchedule was just a better fit for me than Meet Edgar. Okay, between CoSchedule and my VA going in there and periodically manning it and putting some of my archived posts in there and stuff like that, I'm more happy with what is going on my Twitter account right now than I was with Meet Edgar. Now, there's still stuff that, you could put full updates into CoSchedule that with anything that you want. It is a social media tool. It's just that being that it works in conjunction with WordPress, it makes it the perfect fit for what I was saying earlier, and that is that you want to share your new content multiple times, specifically on Twitter in that case, okay? So it really does come down to using the right tool for the job, and I want you to understand that really what it comes down to is the 80-20 rule. We've talked about the 80-20 rule before, but it's the idea that you get 80% of your results from 20% of your efforts. Well, social media, almost without fail, always falls in that 80% of efforts that's responsible for 20% of your results. In other words, it is not the most efficient way to spend your time. So for that reason, you most definitely need to employ some kind of tool to automate it. Now realize that automaticity, the automatic robot-style social media updates only take you so far. You still need to be a human being and interact with the people who are following you, okay? But you can spark conversation with having updates that you don't have to send manually. And I know that some of the social media purists out there get really pissed off about the idea of automating anything, but okay, whatever. I have a different opinion. I also realize that there's something called leverage when you're building a business. You got to concentrate on the right things. And for me, and probably for you as well, social media is not where you should be spending a majority of your time. Okay? So use a tool, automate it, set up a schedule for yourself, maybe 10 or 15 minutes a day where you interact with your Twitter audience and have the two-way thing going on. And that's it. Get busy onto other things. Okay? So those are a few of the social media tools that I've used to help grow my business. Maybe you'll find some of them useful. And I will see you on the next episode of Coffee Break Blogging. Thanks so much.